Okay, so let's start with our initial prayer. Dear Lord, our Master, model and guide Jesus, we thank you for one more Sunday that we're here, for one more opportunity to work on ourselves, to improve ourselves, to listen, to try and understand, to slowly awaken our conscience. We thank you for all the blessings that you shower upon us, even when we don't understand that they are blessings. We thank you, Lord, for all the challenges that you place before us, because they are for our development. They are blessed opportunities for us to evolve intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. May today's meeting help us have a better understanding of how important it is that we belong in the universe, that we are able to understand and feel that we are your children. May we be able to give you the only gift we can. So, thank you. Okay, all right. So let's get started. So today we're going to reflect on another verse of the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi, where there's sadness, let me sow joy. And we're going to reflect on how we can build our own joy. How can we sow our own joy? But first, let's take a look at the whole prayer again, so it makes sense to us. So the prayer of Saint Francis of Assisi is, Lord, make me an instrument of your peace. Where there's hatred, let me sow love. Where there's injury, pardon. Where there's discord, union. Where there's doubt, faith. Where there's despair, hope. And where there's darkness, light. And when there is sadness, joy. O divine Master, grant that I may not so much seek to be consoled as to console, to be understood as to understand, to be loved as to love. For it is giving that we receive. It is pardoning that we are pardoned. And it is in dying that we are born to eternal life. So today's talk was taken again from the book Sublime Oração de Francisco de Assis, one of my favorite books. So we've had talks on quite a few verses now. So today's verse is, and where there is sadness, joy. So where there is sadness, let me sow joy. Now, the first question is St. Francis of Assisi saying that or is he asking the Lord that he can sow joy all over the world? Is that the idea?
Maybe it's eternally, right?
Exactly. So first, start with us. Because can we give or can we offer something that we don't have? Can
No.
we? Definitely not. I can't give something that I don't have. So how can I sow joy if I don't have it for myself? Right? Then it won't be true. So can we be an instrument? Can we be an instrument of the Lord's peace? Because the prayer starts with, "Oh Lord," right? So let's go back. So the prayer starts with, "Lord, make me an instrument of your peace." So can we be an instrument of the Lord's peace? Just yes or no. Can we be an instrument of the Lord's peace?
Yeah, that's like, yeah.
Of course. Yes, of course we can. How?
Example.
Okay, so the first
No,
one was a simple yes or no. Now I'm starting to make it a little more complex. So yes, we can. Like Bob the Builder says, can we build it? Yes, we can. So we can be an instrument of the Lord's peace, but how?
Starting giving example.
I will answer with another question, and we go back to the first question. Can I be an instrument of the Lord's peace if I don't have peace myself? No. So how can we be an instrument of the Lord's peace? First, we need to be at peace. Oops. First, we need to be at peace, right? Because again, we can't give something we don't have. So we can be an instrument. And we are going to be an example once we have that inner peace for ourselves. Can we sow joy where there's sadness? If we can be an instrument of the Lord's peace, why can't we sow joy where there's sadness? What's the condition for us to sow joy where there's sadness? To be joyful. Again, we need to have it for ourselves. It sounds obvious, but it's not. In the society we live today, there is this childish notion. There's this childish idea that people are supposed to make other people happy. So like I said, it sounds obvious, but it's not obvious because sometimes we still think that it's our job to make people happy. No matter how sad I have to make my kids happy. I was to be like that. No matter how devastated I have to put on a smile because it's my obligation not to worry my parents. So again, it sounds obvious that we can't give what we don't have, but we still fool ourselves into thinking that we can. So what we are doing is we're not giving true joy. We're not giving real joy because we don't feel that for ourselves. So how can we give it? How can we sow? How can we spread it? So the first thing we need is to have it. As obvious as it sounds, sometimes we still slip, right? Okay, now when we talk about sadness, what kind of sadness are we talking about? Are we talking about the kind of sadness of when we hear of an accident with a team of kid hockey players? Because that makes everybody sad, right? But is that the kind of sadness we're talking about here? Is that negative? Yes. So there is. There are many kinds, but for now, let's talk about two kinds just to help us understand. There's circumstantial sadness, like this one event that makes us sad. Can I ask you to close the door, please? Thank you. So sometimes an event makes us temporarily sad, right? But it's just a situation. It's temporary. It goes away. But there's the other kind of sadness, and this is what we're talking about here. It's the existential sadness. Can you guys picture the difference of a circumstantial sadness that goes away, caused by an event, and existential sadness, the one that sticks with us from the minute we wake up to the minute we go back to bed? It's a state of mind that persists, right? Okay, so we have already answered the how.
Yes.
Yeah.
Você vai ter que ficar falando inglês?
Oh, yeah.
Eu nem te...
Well, it would be preferable, but if you don't want to, you can speak in Portuguese, but I will always answer in English because we are also taping for YouTube. Oh, no, don't worry, don't worry. Most people who watch are Brazilians, but in case a native speaker wants to watch, they will understand.
No, I just would like to comment that the sadness is, I think, is when some people, I met one person that for 56 years, almost 57 years, she never had room to celebrate life. And she was in constant sadness. She never realized how beautiful life and everything about, and not grateful. She never realized that. And it's possible to find people like that.
Oh, yes, they're everywhere.
And the energy that person passes is really dragging.
Mm-hmm.
It's really bad.
Yes. So now what we're going to talk about, and it affects everybody around you. So now we're going to talk about the vicious cycle of sadness. Okay? So what are the parts of the vicious cycle of sadness? So let's see how that vicious cycle keeps going around. So my animation didn't work. So the origin of sadness is, it originates from the feeling of indifference, which generates desperation. So indifference, when we don't really feel, when we don't care. Even though it's a feeling of I don't care, it generates desperation for that person. Why don't I feel? Why can't I care? What's wrong with me? What can I do about it? The person gradually closes themselves within, not allowing the divine essence that they are to flow. So they close like an oyster. And they feel indifferent to the rest of the world. I'm the center of the universe. Something is wrong with me, but it's just me. I close within myself. It's me. I can't be happy. I can't this. I. What causes it? The inhibition of the flow of the essential energies causes the existential sadness. So again, not that sadness of something that happened that made me sad, but it will go away. It's the sadness that doesn't go away. That's the existential sadness. Originated by the feeling of not belonging in the universe. The person feels isolated, and for that reason, they want to create an egocentric system of life. It's that attitude of nobody understands me. Nobody gets me. I don't belong. I'm different from everybody. Nobody loves me. Nobody cares. And while we worry that nobody on the outside cares, we don't care about them either. And then we go back to the indifference. So we project to have others because they don't understand me. I don't belong. I'm different. I'm the black sheep in the family. I don't have any friends. And then I close myself. So see how it's a cycle? I don't get out of my shell. I want to create something that is just for me, my own rules, but it's still because of others.
Yeah, but
No more.
that point, the person, the spirit is sick, the brain is sick, the physical body, they are sick as well. It's pathological. It's more than that.
Every disease starts with our spirit. And that's how we cure them, starting by
The
our
spirit
spirit.
into this world already.
Well, after incarnation, after incarnation, after incarnation, after incarnation. It's not a one life thing.
No.
It's something that has been
Cycles.
going on. It's a cycle. And we need to, in order to get out of it, we need to break the cycle, right? But let's continue in the vicious cycle of sadness. So we saw the origin and the cause. Then what we call movement. So like what happens? When the existential sadness becomes deep, it produces depression due to the indifference before life, before here mediante, diferença mediante a vida, caused by the rebellion of not accepting the condition of their own lives. I don't accept that I have these parents. That makes me sad. I don't accept that I couldn't go to university. That makes me sad. I don't accept that I'm overweight. That makes me sad. I don't accept that I have children who are not what I imagined they were going to be. That makes me sad. So I don't accept the conditions of my own life. I rebel against them. I think I don't deserve them. I think I deserve better. Because again, it's all about me. Right? Now, this person doesn't feel like they belong in the universe. Because nothing is what they wanted. Nothing is how they imagined. Nothing happens the way they would like it to. Then they want to create their own universe according to their own rules. Is that possible in reality? Definitely not. We can't. The divine laws are universal. Right? I'm not an exception. Mary is not an exception. John is not an exception. Nobody is an exception. The universal laws, the divine laws, are for everybody. But when we get into that deep sadness, in our minds, we convince ourselves that we can create something that is just ours, just our universe. And that, many times, can take this deep sadness to the brink of self-annihilation. Pode levar à beira da auto-aniquilação. Because we want to dull our feelings. We want to annul our feelings. We don't want to feel. Because nothing is what we wanted. So if we try to feel it, it hurts. So we don't want to feel it. Does that make sense? We don't want transpersonal feelings. We don't want psychological feelings. We don't want intellectual feelings. We don't want emotional feelings. We don't want to feel because we think that feeling hurts. And it only hurts because we can't accept our condition of life. That's the only reason it hurts. So this existential sadness can manifest in many different ways. So for example, a mild depression, where a person has depression, but they can still function in society. They go to work, they might have a family, they might have a few friends, but they're always sad, like the person you mentioned. They can live in society, they function in society, but they're never satisfied. It can manifest as negativity. that person who keeps waiting for a disaster to happen. That person who says, everything sucks. Nothing is good. I'm sure that if I go out on the street now, a bus is going to hit me. The person who doesn't want to celebrate. The person who gets a promotion at work and says, oh, I bet next month I'm going to be fired. So that kind of negativity also comes from not accepting our condition. And there's like deep depression, where we think of suicide, where we really want to get rid of life. We think it's gonna stop. We're gonna stop hurting. And as spiritists, we know that's not the case. We only make it worse. Now the application. Here, application is, what does it mean in our lives? What does it mean in practical terms? When a person is very sad, what do? In practical terms, they isolate themselves. In this movement of physical isolation, there is something much deeper, derived from the existential sense, the wish to isolate the divine essence that they are, along with all the feelings that it manifests. So we want to isolate ourselves, and we want to put a barrier between us and our divine essence. We want to separate us from the divine. God doesn't exist, or God's not fair. Why is God doing this to me? What did I do to deserve it? So we want to separate ourselves from the divine. So we either stop believing in God, or we start blaming God for everything that happens to us. God's doing that to me. Wow, what did I do? So that's why many times, in order to physically reflect these feelings, we lock ourselves in a room, close the windows, close the curtains, close the door, don't leave the house. We want to isolate ourselves physically from the world to reflect those feelings we have inside. Because we are trying to dull, to numb, amortecer our conscience. We don't want to feel. Because we think feeling hurts, because we think God's being unfair to us. Okay, so we've seen the vicious cycle of sadness. How then can we build our own joy? What do we do to get out of the vicious cycle of sadness?
I think it's a lot about resilience, right?
Yes. I was expecting a much simpler answer. We break the cycle, right? If I'm going through a cycle that is unpleasant, if I'm going through a cycle that is bad, I want to get out of there. The only way I can get out of there is if I break that cycle. Correct? So what we do is we replace the vicious cycle with a virtuous cycle. Sadness is a vice, not good. Joy, a virtue, good. So I replace the vicious with the virtuous cycle of joy. Simple, right? Yeah, speaking it is, right? Easier said than done. So let's again take a look. The same way we saw the vicious cycle, let's see what the virtuous cycle is made of. Oh, finally working. Okay. So the origin of the virtuous cycle of joy. So joy originates in the feeling of belonging created by hope, in which the person identifies themselves with the essential within them, and they follow the divine essence that they allow, and they allow the divine essence that they are to flow, generating a flux of the essential energies within them in a balanced way. So it's not the I hate the world, and it's not the fairy dust sparkly thing. It's a balance, right? We need balance. And then again, when we don't feel like we belong, we close ourselves. Can any energy flow if we're closed? If we're not open? It can't. The energy can only flow if we open ourselves to the divine essence. If we remove that wall that says, why is God doing this to me? If we remove that wall, then we will be able to let that energy flow. What causes joy? It's the balance of the essential energy flux, generated by the feeling of belonging in the universe, causes existential joy. When the person feels one with the universe. So we drop the attitude, like we tell our kids, drop the attitude. We drop the attitude. And we start to understand and feel that God's not doing anything to us. Right? We belong in the universe. And spiritists, most of all, we should have that understanding, because we know that what's happening to us right now is not necessarily a consequence of our actions in this life. Some things are, but not everything.
Sometimes we try to blame the cause and effects from other lives, but sometimes we don't realize that it's something that we are doing right now.
Exactly. Exactly. And this is, again, closing ourselves. This is like we are trying to fool ourselves because we don't want to feel, we don't want to reflect. Because if I reflect and I realize that it is something that I'm doing right now, it means that I will have to change. And historically speaking, we resist change. Right? Most of us, human race in general, we resist change. So if I realize that something that I'm doing in this life is causing, if I realize that a negative cause in this life is giving me a negative effect, I will have to change. So it's easier to say, oh, I'm sure it's something from the previous life, and I'll fix it next time. I'll fix it in next. I don't have to do it now. We spiritists, we say that a lot. Because we lack a better understanding of this. We lack the understanding, even though we know that we are immortal spirits, we know that we're going to reincarnate, we know that we evolve, we know that the spirits communicate, we know all the basic principles of spiritism, but we lack a deeper understanding of this. We know the facts, but we don't understand what they mean in our practical lives.
Talk about that, those sadness and joys, sometimes it's easy like see others, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my mom, my dad, my wife. But we, a lot of the time, most of the time, have in each different part of our life moments of sadness, moments of that I don't agree with that, or something that's I try to avoid, as you said.
We rebel all the time.
Yeah.
Not always with anger. Sometimes when we refuse to do something or refusing to feel, it's also rebellion. We always think of rebellion as, something angry. No, rebellion means going against the law. And it's not always with rage. It's not always with anger. Many times, it's by refusing to reflect and make a change that would make our lives better, would help us evolve faster, would help everybody around us. Right? And what's the movement? The movement of existential joy is the one Saint Francis of Assisi, of course, called perfect joy. Now, they have one version of a story here. I searched on the internet and I found a few other versions, both in English and in Portuguese. They're all fairly similar. In some version, Saint Francis asks Brother Leo, in Portuguese, Frei Leão. In other versions, he just tells Brother Leo. So you might find a few different versions. But this what Saint Francis called perfect joy comes from a little passage in his life where he was walking with Brother Leo. So in some part of Europe, and then they don't have it. It's a different name now, but I don't know what it is now. And Umbria. Does anybody know what part it is of Europe? Because I don't. I'm sorry. Forgive my ignorance. But yeah, they are walking, and it's winter, and it's snowing, and they're cold, and they're hungry. And then Saint Francis asks Brother Leo, what is perfect joy? Alegria perfeita. What is perfect joy? And then Brother Leo tries to give a few examples. First, he says, oh, it is spreading the word of Jesus to everybody and to everybody who lives in Jesus. And St. Francis says, that's not perfect joy yet. What do you think it is? And then Brother Leo gives another example. Oh, it's speaking to all the rich people so that they would understand the need to share their money with the whole world. And St. Francis says, no, that's not perfect joy yet. And then they keep going on the conversation until a certain point, St. Francis gives an example to Brother Leo of what is perfect joy. And then he says, can you see that house far away there? And Brother Leo says, yes, I can. And St. Francis says, imagine now that we go to that house, we knock on the door, and when a man opens the door, we say, we are your brothers, Francis of Assisi and Leo. We are hungry, we are cold. Can you please give us the leftovers from your table? And that man actually beats us with a stick, sends us away, and said, get away from here. No, I'm not going to help you. And he slams the door. And the two of us, hungry and cold, falling on the snow, we look at the sky, we're going to cry in happiness, and we're going to thank God. This is perfect joy. Doesn't that sound weird? So what does St. Francis trying to say? What does he mean? In such a horrible situation, such a bad circumstance, why would he call that perfect joy? Can you think why that would possibly be perfect joy? Can you think why that would be perfect joy? What he's trying to say here is this. In a situation of adversity, we are invited to thank God for the challenge experience, because it's nothing but a trial to help us improve. And this brings us back to the whole knowledge we have of cause and effect, of successive reincarnations, of we are trying to fix our mistakes from the past, at the same time that we are trying to push ourselves to do better. Not everything that happens to us is because we're paying for something or we're fixing something. A lot of things are challenges that we asked for in order for us to evolve faster. So remember, there are trials and atonements, provas e expiações, and they are different. Expiation or atonement, we're trying to fix a mistake. A trial, we are testing ourselves. It's a challenge that if we understand it's a challenge, if you have that feeling, if we feel we belong in the universe, if we understand we're children of God, and that is an experience, it's a challenge that will help us grow, that is perfect joy. We understand it's a challenge. It's a simple concept, but it takes a lot of work for us to really understand and feel. It takes practice, a lot of practice. So, a point for reflection. Is the body we use ours? Does this body belong to me?
Realism.
The planet in which we live, is it ours?
The right point.
Our loved ones, our friends, our family members, are they our property? Our jobs, do we own anything here? They are loans. God loans them. It's not even a lease, because a lease you can buy out at the end, right? We can't buy anything out. It's just a loan. It's just a divine loan, and that's it. God lends it to us and hopes that we're going to make good use of it. Now, if everything comes from God, our Creator, what can we give Him? What do you give someone who has everything? What can we give love? Or what can we give God?
Love.
Not just love. We've been studying this in the divine presence of God in our lives.
Thank you. Gratidão.
Gratitude.
Gratitude.
It's gratitude is the end of the cycle. After we give Him what we can, the end of the cycle is gratitude. Gratitude is when you already have the understanding. It's the perfect joy that Francis was saying. Like when you're kicked out and you look at the sky and you thank God for that challenge. That's already gratitude. It's the end of the virtuous cycle. But before we get there, in order to break the vicious cycle, the only thing we can give God is our love and our unconditional surrender. Not surrender like I'm defeated, but surrender as I give myself to you. I understand that I am your child. I understand that fulfilling the divine laws is what's gonna make me happy. It's perfect when I accept the challenge.
The submission, right?
Yes, exactly. The submission. I submit to the mission. I accept the mission.
From the
Exactly.
115?
Yes.
From the
Question 150. Are all spirits created the same, or are some created evil and some good? So we're all created simple and ignorant. We're all given a mission that will lead us to perfection. Some of us submit to the mission, and get to perfection faster. And some of us murmur, complain, rebel, revolt. And here we are. So what we can give God is our decision to use our free will deeply and lovingly. The one gift God gave us that we have full use. The only thing that is truly ours is our free will. That's the only thing that truly belongs to us. Our free will. So when we decide to use our free will with love, true love, then we're breaking that vicious cycle. When we decide to use our free will, here's the thing. When we decide to use our free will to unconditionally surrender, to submit ourselves to the mission God gave us, then we're breaking it. And again, it's not the flip of a switch. It's not turn on, turn off. It happens gradually, in quick moments of reflection and awakening our minds. So in a quick moment of reflection, I realize right here, right now, this is not right. For example, anxiety. I am anxious. In a moment of reflection, I realize I'm eating my whole pantry because of anxiety. Is the solution to go on a diet? No. The solution is to break the cycle of anxiety and replace it with what would be the virtues? Very close. Serenity. So I break the cycle of anxiety with serenity. Just like I would break the cycle of sadness with joy, I break the cycle of anxiety with serenity. So I have that moment of reflection. I realize I'm anxious. Just like I realize I'm sad. So now I need to work on how I'm going to replace anxiety with serenity, sadness with happiness. And it all starts with the decision to use our free will the right way. Instead of rebelling, instead of revolting, trying to reflect and understand. Using the knowledge we have of reincarnations, of spiritual world, we have all that knowledge. Now we need to put it in practice and understand deeply what that means. God does not restrain our free will. That's why He waits for our surrender. We reach the stage of perfect joy when we decide to surrender ourselves in any circumstances. Not just when it's convenient for us. If we surrender to God when it's convenient for us, when it's easy, good. But perfect joy will come when we decide to surrender in any circumstances, even when we're cold and hungry and we get kicked out. We are still surrendering. And that is going to bring us perfect joy. Help. No, there is a message for Eric and it's covering all my comments. And I can't. Oh, there. Dismissed. Thank you. Okay, so nothing else belongs to us. God has everything. The only thing He asks is that we surrender using our free will properly, respecting the divine laws. That's how we use our free will properly. We respect the divine laws, and we will reach the stage of perfect joy. Question 15. We will finally reach perfect happiness. Like question 15 tells us, we will. And we will. Yeah, what did I say?
50.
115. Thank you very much. Okay. Now, therefore, perfect joy means to give ourselves to God and Jesus. Like Paul of Tarsus said, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. When Paul of Tarsus said this, it's because he had reached the understanding of what it means to surrender ourselves to God in any circumstances. From the moment he met Jesus at the door of Damascus, he only lived for Jesus. He made many mistakes, but he went back and he fixed them. The mistakes he made were because he was trying to do it right. So he had to do exactly what we have to do. Reflect and exercise the virtue. Reflect, pinpoint what we're not doing right, and try to work the virtue that's the opposite. Replace anxiety with serenity. Replace sadness with joy. Replace hatred with pardon, forgiveness. So that's the exercise that we are invited to do in order to reach that state that St. Francis, who was actually John the Apostle reincarnated, reached, that Paul of Tarsus reached when he said, I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. So that's the state we're going for. Again, it's not a flip of a switch. It's gradual. But again, if we want to break the cycle, we have to do something about it. If we just understand, okay, I get it, but I don't do anything about it, we're not going to break the cycle. Right? Can I have this perfect joy, this existential joy here and now? You think? Jeez. Can we experience the perfect joy the same way the superior spirits experience, like Francis or Paul of Tarsus? Exactly. That's the key. We can. But it's relative to our level of evolution. So if our objective is to become Saint Francis, who was actually John the Apostle, or Paul of Tarsus, we are aiming too high. I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's not very realistic. So we need to have a better understanding of how far we can go, of what heights can we reach. We can definitely go very far, depending on our efforts. The more efforts we make, the farther we're going to go. But again, we need to understand that it's going to be relative to our level of evolution and to the efforts we make. The more efforts we make, the more results we get. Cause and effect. Simple mathematics, right? But we need the understanding. We don't want to let ourselves down. We need the understanding that it's going to be directly related to our efforts. Okay, and what's the application? What does it mean in my practical life to have the perfect joy? The existential joy that comes from this surrender will manifest itself in everything we do. Not even a smile or a glance go without the expression of this existential joy, because we start to feel everything as a gift of life. And since everything belongs to God, the only thing we can give him is the loving and voluntary surrender of our hearts. Because again, once we have that real, that existential joy, not the pleasure of buying new shoes or the pleasure of buying a new house or the pleasure of going on a trip we really wanted to. So again, we're not talking about circumstances. We're talking about existential joy. Relatively speaking, that feeling St. Francis gave us the example of. Once we have that, we automatically give it. We have it, we can give, we spread. And it's going to reflect in everything we do. Again, let's think of St. Francis of Assisi. Let's think of St. Augustine. Let's think of Chico Xavier. Let's think of Mother Teresa. Spirits that had a much deeper understanding of this perfect joy than we do. Mahatma Gandhi. So everything they did reflected this existential joy. Everything they did was a huge poster that they understood they're children of God and they belong in the universe. They were one with the universe. Without closing themselves, but actually spreading the joy that they had for themselves. Does that make sense? Easy to do? Hard. Yes. It's not easy, but it's not difficult. It is a lot of hard work. Because it takes a million tiny reflections every single day on the smallest of actions, on how we talk to our bosses, on how we talk to our parents, how we talk to our children, how we feel when someone does something that we don't like. Because changing something that I say, changing how I treat a co-worker is a lot easier than changing how I feel when someone does something to me. So again, patient, constant, disciplined efforts. There is, well, like they say in English, no pain, no gain. Without efforts, there's no merit. And again, God has everything. So he waits for us to surrender. And the moment we decide to do that, the merit is only ours. Because nobody needs us. So that means it's our merit. We've earned it. We've earned our existential joy. Any comments? Food for thought? A lot.
Yeah, this is a very important phrase because we start to feel everything as a gift of life. Since everything belongs to God.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the only thing we can give him is our free will. Well, him or her is our free will. It's the decision to do things right, not for God, not for anybody else, but for ourselves. We can't change anybody. However, the more we change for the better, the more we become an example for everybody else. Not only that, once we reach existential joy, once we reach that perfect joy, perfect happiness, and we have all that love within, we can't be happy if we see everything around us is crumbling down. We can be happy without fixing the problems that we have caused. And most of the time, those involve other people. So we fulfill the law of love, we fulfill the law of justice, supported by the law of love. So that justice, what's fair, what's not fair. First, law of love. I need to learn to love myself, and then I will be able to love my neighbor as myself. Also, the law of justice is fulfilled based on the law of charity. Once I love myself, I can't be happy alone. If I know I'm part of the universe, I want everything to be in harmony. I want to be in tune, in sync, in harmony with the universe and with everything and everybody around me. So we go back to the law of justice. Through the law of charity, I want everybody to feel the same existential joy I do, to feel the same perfect happiness that I do. Therefore, we go to treat other people the way you like to be treated. Law of charity. Love, love others as I love myself. So love myself first. Law of charity, treat others the way I would like to be treated. And if I love myself, I know exactly how I want to be treated. And it's going to make it easier for me to treat everybody else the way I want to be treated. Baby steps, but we will get there.
Tomorrow will be this lecture in Portuguese or?
I don't know if I am on the lecture tomorrow. Why? You want to see it in Portuguese? A little more, to sink in a little more. Yeah. Well, you know what? If Eddie wants to translate it to French and do it in French, we can do 3 languages, Spanish, because it's a lot. And again, we already do have a superficial knowledge of the basic facts of Spiritism. Now what we need is a deeper understanding. Knowing is not the same as understanding. So we know. Now we need to understand in order for us to feel. And in this case, repetition is a charm. So I don't know, but it could be if I am on the lecture tomorrow, and if you guys want the same lecture, I'm happy to translate. Actually, I had to translate it because it was all in Portuguese, so I had to do it all in English. So I can just go back to the Portuguese. Questions? Comments? Experiences to share? Oh. Okay. May I please ask you to see if the kids are done? Oh, there. We just finished. We just need to do our final. Okay. Are the kids going to present something?
No.
Okay. My front door was open. I hope it's my kids. Okay. So let's close our eyes. Let's take a deep breath. And allow all the content of everything that we discussed to sink into our brains. Because, Lord, we know that first come the thoughts, then thoughts become feelings, and the feelings become actions. So let us understand with our minds first, in order for us to understand with our hearts, so that we can finally move to actions. Jesus, our Master, our hearts are filled with gratitude for the example you came to give us, for all the teachings you left us. We thank our spiritual guides for enlightening us, for guiding us. We thank them for being present here and for working with us when many times we're not even deserving of their time and attention. Please, Lord, we ask that the little light that we tried to light up here today be shared with our brothers, with those who are watching online, with our families. May we bring some of this joy home. May we bring some understanding to those in need, as we also understand these things ourselves. We ask for our protection and guidance so that we may have a productive week, reflecting, trying to feel and act upon our actions so that we can break all our vicious cycles and turn them into virtues. So be it. We're going for the best.